Sure.
Okay, and welcome to another Kicking It with Sensei. And today we're joined by Ken Knight of Kenfu TV here on YouTube and many other platforms. And you're very welcome, Ken.
Thank you, sir. So great to meet you.
Thank you. And if you just want to tell the audience about how you get started in martial arts.
Sure. I think my story is the same story that so many other people have, which is I was a kid and I watched the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the Power Rangers and all the stuff, and I was into it. I thought it was amazing. And if I'm honest, the thing that I latched onto, and I think, both of those shows really had it. And what's funny is, Power Rangers was not a great show, and 50% of it or more was straight out of Japan, out of a completely different show, just cut and spliced in. But what I thought that they showed really well was how something like that could bring a group together and give you purpose and give you, community. And to me, that always seemed amazing. Then you're watching The Karate Kid and you get the idea of mentorship and having somebody in your life who, just kind of helps ground you a little bit and kind of helps guide you through when things are tough, having somebody to go to. And so when I started, my interest in the martial arts started more as an interest in those things than it was the physical stuff. Of course, yeah, I wanted to be cool. I wanted to do cool kicks and do stuff, but
Yeah.
I wanted to learn weapons and do all the things. But that was my real goal. And I started karate when I was, I don't know, some kind of age of a kid, when it was during summer and I was in Alabama and I trained for a little bit. And then I was headed back to Wyoming for the school year. And I asked my sensei, I said, hey, what do I do? I've just barely started training, and I don't know what it's like to go find another place to train. And he said, well, just go find a Japanese karate school and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
His style was Yoshikai karate. And I came back and I couldn't find that. There was some taekwondo, there was some stuff, and I was like, okay, well, I can't find what I'm looking for. And I didn't really know enough to pursue a lot, so I just kind of practiced what I knew, and years would go by. Before I'd actually pick it up. I didn't actually really, so I don't consider that when I started. It's just kind of the first interaction I had with it.
Yeah.
Then I met my instructor in 2006 through work. He was a guy that we did work for. My boss mentioned that he did some of that stuff, so I asked him about it, and he said, yeah, come by, let's do it.
Excellent.
And I've been doing it ever since. In fact, I guess now I run the school. He gave me the school a few years ago, so now I run the school that I trained in. And since then, I've trained other martial arts as well along the way, as you do, at least as I think you do.
Yeah.
When you're interested in it, you go find it.
Excellent. And before we move on, we have to ask it, who was your favorite turtle? Who was the one
Oh,
that got you started?
Donatello, favorite. So funny story about that. As I have, I love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
They made piggy banks of the turtles, and I have them, and so it was perfect. So American currency, you've got pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters, right? So 4 currencies and 4 turtles. So I got all 4 piggy banks, and I ranked them. So Raphael gets my pennies. I like Raphael. I think he gets a hard knock, but he's kind of a jerk. But he's a jerk that cares. Either way, he's my least favorite. Then Leonardo is after that. Michelangelo is like my second favorite, and then Donatello was always my favorite.
Excellent. I was always a Raphael guy, but
You were a Raphael guy? Oh
I,
yeah.
th-
So
I think since that rooftop scene where he took on the whole Foot Clan and single-handedly, it was kind of me hooked.
oh yeah, like, and that's just the thing is like, especially my feelings for him and the different people kind of started differently as you get older and you pay attention to it. He's a complicated guy. He is a complex guy. He's got a lot going on, and you kind of feel for him
Yeah.
because it's almost like he's not capable of expressing his feelings about it. And but it's not that he doesn't have them, and that's why him and Leonardo butt heads so much, is because I think he wants to have that kind of that acceptance and that, and people to like him the way they like Leonardo, but it doesn't go that way. But he's got his own things, and he's an interesting character. I think he's super interesting. He's probably got the most depth. He probably has the most depth of any of them.
Yeah, definitely. And you're famous for saying you practice Kenfu, but what is Kenfu? I
Okay,
know
yeah.
it goes back to your childhood, but
Yeah, yeah. When I was a kid, I would just say, yeah, you could do kung fu, I do kenfu. You know, it's just it was a play on words, it was a joke. But now it's just what I call what I do, and my personal belief is that we all do our own thing, right? When we're on the mat, you are the only you on the mat. Every person next to you is the only them on the mat, and none of us are each other. Even twins don't have that aren't the same, you know.
yeah,
And so when it comes to what makes up Kenfu, I've primarily studied Okinawan karate, uh, Japanese jiu-jitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Okinawan kabuto, Filipino martial arts. Those are the primary things that I've trained along the way. Some aikido, some tai chi. Those are all the things that inform who I am. And but Kenfu just refers to me being me. You know, and I joke if you've watched the channel for a long time, so
yeah,
you've seen Ben when I'm doing stuff with Ben. So we joke that Ben has Benfu. You
yeah.
know, but everybody has their own thing. You would have your own thing, um, because there's no other way for it to be. What you do is what you do, and that's Kenfu. That's the idea of Kenfu.
Excellent. And do you think it takes time in a style to develop that kind of, your replica of your instructor to a certain point, and then you start to blossom into your own system, or
So in a way, no, and in a way, yes. So the in a way, no. In a way, no. I think it's immediate, right?
yeah,
You are always you. You are shown what you're shown. Your instructor gives you what they give you. You have what you have, but it has to come out of you. And when it comes out of you, you know, it's like passing through a filter. When it comes out of you, it's you. It might not be very good. You know, initially it's bad, and you're just doing the best you can. And then you're right. Over time, you look like your instructor, you look like your influences, and you're training to do that. Um, but you were always you. So in a way, I would say that it's always there. It's just not always what you like until over time you can start to appreciate and refine it. You know, a bonsai tree is always a bonsai tree, even when it's just a little thing peeking out of the dirt. But it's not really becoming a bonsai tree and doing the thing that we think of until it's become mature and it's started to be cultivated by somebody who's doing that.
yeah,
And that's kind of how I see that unintentional Karate Kid reference right there, right?
yeah.
But that's kind of it. It's like the tree was always the tree. It becoming the thing that you are happy with or you wanted it to be takes time, but it was always the tree.
And have you always been inclined towards weapons? You mentioned you practice Kabuto and Filipino martial arts, which are
Mm-hmm.
very, well, Kabuto was completely weapons, but Filipinos, a lot
Yeah,
of
very
stick
weapon
fighting, very
focused.
weapon focused. Have you always been drawn towards that?
Absolutely. You know, loved obviously well the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like that was a personal pride moment when I had learned all four weapons. You know, and I was like,
Yeah,
I had a reasonable a facsimile of understanding of each weapon. I was like, I've made it. You
yeah,
know, but I mean, you see it in, and even I mean, my last name is Knight. You know, so I spent a lot of time looking at medieval things, and there was a lot of weaponry there, and weapons are fascinating. You know,
yeah,
our tools are fascinating. And so I've always had an interest in that. And it took me time to develop the appreciation for them that I have now. But I've always really had an interest, and not just in using them, but just understanding them. Why did we build them the way we built them? You know,
yeah,
go watch Highlander, and everybody's got a different sword. Why was their sword that way, or why was I just always had an interest in that sort of thing, to the point of having designed a few knives and having some of those made, and kind of being able to put thought into how a tool does the things that it's supposed to do. Um, and then just spending time with any weapon I can put my hands on. I've got a hole in the other room. I've got an entire wall of different things that I've collected. And at night, when the house gets quiet, I'll just go pick something off the wall and just train for a while. You know, just move around, Karanza, that kind of thing.
yeah,
And it's the same, but it's always different. You know, the
yeah,
using a weapon truly in a lot of ways is always the same, but the type of weapon informs how it works. Each one has
yeah,
its own attributes. You know, an axe or a tomahawk is very forward heavy. A dagger is very nimble. Swords vary greatly. Wooden weapons can vary greatly too, including where you can hold them and how you hold them and how you deliver power, and do you even deliver, are they impact, or now I look at Kabuto as an idea of weapon categories.
Yeah.
Weapons tend to break into, are they an impact weapon, a slashing weapon, a piercing weapon, a flexible weapon, or a weapon of distraction, and then a projectile weapon. I kind of think they kind of break into all of those categories, and Kabuto, while Kabuto weapons themselves are maybe not as appropriate or useful these days, I think that they're a great way to understand the attributes of a certain type of weapon, if it's trained that way.
Yeah.
If you train very specifically on how to use the sai, and you're not a whatever century Japanese policeman using that to take control of a person who's wielding a sword, then it's probably not super useful to you. You could spend a lot of time on something that's not really helping you, but I think there's value in that pursuit also, if that's what you're into.
Yeah, definitely. I've spent many years practicing sai.
Have you?
It's, as someone who teaches a lot of self-defense, it's totally impractical. You're never going to be walking down the street with a set of sai.
You're not.
Especially here in Ireland, you'd be arrested for it. But have you got a favorite weapon, or do you just love everything you can put your hands on?
I love them all. There was a conversation that stands out in my mind from when I was talking to a student, and I was like, I love the stick. I was moving around a baston from FMA, just a stick, right? 28-inch stick. Or if you're into Kabuto, kind of Tombo, I guess is what it would be. And she looks at me and she's like, but I thought that the nunchaku were your favorite. I was like, well, that's just a stick that bends in the middle. She's like, but you also really like the gama. And I'm like, well, that's just a stick with a sickle on it. And I'm like, and the bow is just a long stick, and the jo, a jo is a long stick, a bow is a longer stick. The sai is a stick with tines. I think at that time, that was the moment that I was realizing that they all share the same basic concept to themselves. And so definitely kind of a stick is probably my favorite. In fact, I don't know. That's a great question. A short stick. I trained for a long time. I trained just with like a pen, because a pen is something you can carry all the time. You can have with you. Yeah. Pens, I tell people, the 3 best weapons you can ever have are a pen, a flashlight, and a knife. And then I immediately ask why, and I get a lot of answers. But the answers I'm typically, following up myself with is because sometimes I need to write on things, sometimes I need to see in the dark, and sometimes I need to open things. And this follows my philosophy that a tool that you use regularly is more likely to be valuable to you in a time of need than a tool that you can only train for its purpose sometimes.
Yeah.
Like nobody's going to stop me if I get on a plane with a pen and a flashlight. And if I am proficient with that and I need to get to the, maybe I'm at the other end of the plane or I'm in the terminal or whatever. I mean, I use a plane because it's so restrictive. But anywhere, nobody's going to think twice if you're carrying a flashlight. You can do a lot of damage with a flashlight. It's in both the distraction category, disruptive category, because you blast someone in the eyes with that light, it stops, they have to process that, and sometimes it affects their vision. In the dark, it affects it a lot. But it's also an impact tool. You can hit somebody with a flashlight pretty badly. You can fist pack with it. It's a useful thing that I carry all the time because I work in IT and I need to crawl under desks and check cables and get in racks, and a flashlight's super handy. Knife is always third because there's so many places where it's not appropriate to carry a knife, or maybe even not legal to carry one unless you have a good purpose for it. Where I live, that's not the case, but there's a lot of places that are. So a pen and a knife or a pen and a flashlight became something that was kind of my go-to concept. Yeah. And so I would train with a stick, roughly the length of a pen. If you did Japanese stuff, you'd call that the kubotan or whatever. Yeah. They have like the olisi payad in Filipino martial arts, same idea. Olisi payad means palm stick. The words always sound cool, but they mean really simple things. But it's a simple, and it translates immediately to not having one. Yeah. I can easily anywhere pick up something about that size. And if I can't, it hasn't drastically changed what my hands would do in that same situation.
Definitely. And it's a very similar concept to my own, and I always want to put the cell phone on there as well.
Oh, sure,
It's
sure.
always on you, impact weapon, and
Yeah,
also
it's expensive one, expensive to
it's a,
replace,
it's an
but
expensive one, yeah, but
and
it's
they,
always there.
they, that's right. But it's always, it might already just be in your hand,
Yeah,
you know.
definitely.
Yeah.
Now, I know recently you've done a great video on the black belt,
Oh, yeah.
and if you'd like to go into that a little bit and sort of what does it take to get a black belt from you? What do your students have to
Oh.
do to get to that point?
Well, yeah. So obviously, if you want a pretty solid understanding, that video kind of goes into it a fair bit because it was just a
Yeah,
discussion I was having with my students about. It's not a thing I talk about a lot. You probably know. Your viewers may or may not. We use white belts
yeah,
unless you have a black belt. And so rank itself is not a thing that gets talked about a lot on the mat in my school.
yeah,
That was kind of the purpose of going to the white belt. We have rank. We use the Q Dan system, so 10th Q to first Q, or first Dan and up. I still use that system, but switching to the white belt, the purpose of that was your rank is over there on the wall. When you're on the mat, you just need to train. You need to work to be better. You need
yeah,
to work with each other and improve each other. Take advantage of working with everybody. I felt like I would see a lot of, especially in America, I see a lot of people who would really struggle with belts because if a person was really good at something and they were trying to help a person of higher rank with it, that higher rank would just dismiss it because of the rank, right? When
yeah,
it's like, if your belt should be ever changing in color. When you meet and say, hey, we're talking about this particular kick or this technique, it'd be neat if your belt could suddenly change colors to, well, this is how good you are at this thing and that's how
yeah,
good they are at this thing. But because our belts don't do that, sometimes we let our ego get in the way and be like, well, you're a blue belt, who are you to tell me, a brown belt, how to throw this kick, when maybe that blue belt's really freaking good at
yeah,
it. So switching to the white belt, got rid of all that. It just became people training with people, and it kind of let people get past it and start paying attention to who was good at what and asking each other questions and stuff, which I really wanted. That's what I felt like it should be.
yeah,
And so we don't talk about it a lot. So the video was the result of, for the channel, I've been recording sessions. I call them the dojo sessions. I've been recording just in class, just me teaching and talking about things, and then just putting it out there for the world to look at and see and learn something, think something, or disagree with me about stuff. That's fine too. And it just so happened that night it was on my mind to just bring it up and talk to them.
yeah,
And for me, the thing is, a black belt is it's kind of difficult to define in
yeah,
words. I think, it's a culmination of physical skill, knowledge and understanding, like a depth of knowledge, a humble nature, a realization of the dangerous potential of a person with a lot of skill and no control over that
yeah,
skill. Or knowledge too, like not just skill, knowledge too. If you have a lot of knowledge and you don't control it, you could use it for bad. There's so many things that we look at. That a knife is a good example. So many places. What are the knife laws in Ireland?
I'd not allowed them at all
Not allowed
in
them,
public.
right?
It's just
Yeah, and that I was thinking that was the case. And then,
mm,
but it's a tool, right? Why are you not allowed to have them? Because people misused the tool.
yeah,
The tool is good. Well, the tool is neutral. The tool has no anything. It can be used for a useful purpose, or it can be used for a useful but poorly executed purpose.
yeah,
It can be used for good, can be used for bad. And the same thing goes with the things that you know and the things you're capable of. So you have some measure of a moral or ethical perspective that allows you to properly use or pass on knowledge and skill. And to what degree have you started to settle into your own self, your own understanding, and to start to form having your own opinion, right? When you
Yeah.
first start, like you said, you look like your instructor for a while. We very often go through an ego process where we um, argue with people or feel strongly that the way that we were shown is better than the way we saw in the UFC on the cage, or the way we saw in that movie, or the way this guy was showing. We learn later that it's not that. It's a way. And
Yeah.
maybe it is better, maybe it's not better, but we do end up kind of going through, a lot of times we go through this phase where we feel so strongly about it, and it's black and white. The way my sensei showed me is good, and your way is garbage, and that's not a good mentality, right? So part of it is, have you gotten past that mentality? Have you started to realize that there's more to this than the one or two ways I've showed you how to do that thing? And do you have an acceptance of the fact that there's more to it than that, and that other ways are okay too, and open-mindedness and a humble nature, a culmination of all of those things,
Yeah.
with a belief that if you were in a physical confrontation, so my goal is that through this you also develop self-confidence and self-esteem and things that will help you avoid bad situations or build to a good exit. I talk about how my physical skills have helped me mentally when dealing with a difficult person, because I can look at that person, and it sounds so bad every time I say it, but I can look at that person and be like, yeah, but I could kill you. And the whole point of that in my head is, you're being a complete jerk. You're making me really mad.
Yeah.
But the truth is, if this was really bad, I mean, I could probably kill you. I might have to do some tricks to do it, because maybe you are more proficient than I am. I don't know. And the whole idea is that, well, if that's the worst that could happen and we're not there, then it kind of gives me some slack in the line to go, well, let's work through this.
Yeah.
You're a jerk. It's not worth killing you over. Let's figure this out. And to have the ability to not use those skills. But say you're in a position where physical skills are necessary. Well, then part of it is, I do want to know that I want to be able to look at a person and be confident that in that situation, one, they were mentally strong. They had the fortitude to be in that situation and keep their head on straight and manage whatever needed to be done, which might involve them. It could involve people that they care about. There could be a lot of things that affect your mental state. Also, we don't get to choose. We come out of the dojo when we're in our gi and we're in the mat, we're ready, we're on, but we're walking out of the gas station and we're running late for work. Our headspace is different, and that's when those things happen. And a lot of people don't talk about the headspace being different. They're like, well, it's a different situation, the environment's different, and this is different, but your head is different. The things that you're thinking about, the things you're not thinking about, is different. And so, can you pull yourself together? Can you keep your head in the game? Can you make good decisions? And I'm not saying good as in you succeeded. Can you make good decisions and then be able to give up on those decisions and move to other ones if the situation dictates that you need to, or what you're doing isn't working? And do you have the physical ability to do something to defend yourself and escape, or possibly even the fortitude to end someone's life if that's what was necessary? So the culmination of all of that is kind of what I'm looking for a black belt.
Yeah.
And kind of in conjunction with that, the idea that if you're wearing a black belt in my school, that I've given it to you, or one of my instructors have given it to you. And the idea behind that being, what does that mean? A black belt means something to you. Your black belt means something to you.
Yeah.
Right. It has a meaning to you that is your meaning, that it's what it is. When you're on the mat, other people see the black belt, and it means an assumption, right? They assume that you know certain things, that you have certain answers. And so some schools will honor another black belt if you come in and you're like, I want to start training here, but I have a black belt. Some schools will be like, yeah, wear your black belt. That's fine. I don't do that. And the whole reason is not because I don't believe you deserved it. I don't believe you earned it. I don't believe that you have that ability. I don't care about any of that. If your instructor felt like you needed a black belt, you earned it, then you did. Because that's the circumstance that dictates. if you feel, whatever, all of that goes. So for me, if you wear a black belt on the mat, why it has to come from me or one of my instructors is because when the person next to you is looking for advice and looking for help, I want them to realize that you are a person who knows the answer that is within what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Not something else. You can provide that answer from a different context without having to wear a black belt. And so to me, it is two things. It is the thing that it means to you, which is why I give it to you, the things we talked about. And then it is what other people think when they see one. And that's why I think that it's important that if I give a black belt to you, that I should be able to have you on the mat and somebody should be able to ask you questions or do things, and you should have the answers that I would give, and not specifically that, but you should have the knowledge of what you're being asked about.
Definitely.
And so kind of those two components.
Yeah, I have seen that too. As when I was younger, now a teenager, there have been guys that would have been black belts that I would have trained with, and at the time, I think because I was so into martial arts, I always kind of put them on a pedestal. I kind of looked up that they were masters of what they done. And as I got older, I got my own black belt and kind of cross-trained with them. I kind of very quickly realized how limited their knowledge was. And as time went on, I kind of actually realized too that a lot of them couldn't actually defend themselves on the mats. So it was like these guys may have had a black belt 10 years prior to me. And I was going on then after I got mines to train with them and kind of sort of spread my wings a bit after getting my black belt and sparring these guys. And the rounds were lasting very, very little time. And I was very shocked that it went the way it was, that they weren't able to defend someone who just got a black belt when they've held it for a decade. It didn't make sense, but it kind of opened my eyes to martial arts a lot, that not all black belts are equal, or not all belts are equal. And it was a big eye opener now. But
I think that's a good thing that people need to come to that understanding, right?
Yeah.
And so like you come into that understanding, I think that's excellent, because you're right, and not just like color belts make it worse even, because what order do the colors go in and what colors are included? Well, that's as unique as what t-shirt I'm wearing, like it every school could be different. Blue could be early, blue could be late, it could be, so you don't really have a way of knowing. And same thing, like my opinion, and maybe this is full of a bit of an ego, is my opinion is my black belt really only means something to you, not to me, to you, if you know who my teacher was. He's not passed, but who my teacher was is determining what you know about it. So if you go, yeah, he has a black belt from so-and-so, then you can make those assumptions. Then he probably knows these things. He probably fights this way. You know things about it because you know my teacher.
Yeah.
If you don't know that, if all you know is that I have one, well, that could mean literally anything. It could mean that I made a $5 Amazon purchase, and that's why I'm wearing one. I got some sandpaper and wore some made it look like I've been wearing it a long time. And there's schools that, it's different. The requirements are different. So those are my requirements, and that video went into my requirements. That was me telling my students, this is what I expect. But there are plenty of schools that just, did you check all the boxes? Here's our curriculum. You need to know these things. Here's a list of things you need to know. And have you checked off all the boxes that you know these things? And if you have, black belt. And then there's everything in between, right? There's even some places just if you trained long enough, just training long enough is maybe enough. And we know, or at least I believe, that that's not true. There's more to it than that. And the black belt first has to be defined, and then those expectations have to be met. And every school has different expectations. And so, I'd rather if you don't know who I am, like if I put on a black belt and you don't know my teacher, you don't know anything about me, I would rather you know who I am by touching hands with me, and then knowing, because maybe you'll think that I'm worthy of my rank, maybe you'll think that I'm not worthy of my rank, but you'll only know that by us touching hands, right? It'll show on the mat. Your rank will show on the mat. If you are a high level black belt, a high quality black belt, and you get on the mat wearing a white belt, people will still know. People know the difference between a white belt and somebody with skill. And it will show whether you're wearing the fabric or not. And guess what? If you are wearing it goes the other way, right? Like if you are a black belt and you don't have that skill and you're wearing a black belt, people will know that too when they touch hands with you, like you did. They touch hands with them and go, okay, you're not what I expected.
Yeah.
Your skill, I have to kind of map out your skill to being somewhere different than what your belt told me.
Yeah.
You know, and we do it naturally. I think we all do it. When we work with somebody, we all consciously or subconsciously kind of determine where we think that you fit versus maybe what you're actually wearing.
Yeah.
You know, it's relative anyway.
Definitely. And you made a reference to Karate Kid earlier, and I don't know
Oh,
if
sure.
you've been following the Cobra Kai series.
Oh, yes, very much.
Definitely. So every guest I've on, I would ask, which camp would you be in? Cobra Kai, Miyagi-Do, or suppose now this year I'll add Eagle Fang?
Eagle Fang, yeah. You know what? So that's an interesting thing. So overall, I would definitely say Miyagi-Do because and more Miyagi than Daniel. But I'm enjoying seeing the process of Daniel. He's working his way to where Miyagi was from his place, right? Like I struggle to watch who he is and how he's doing things because I'm like, you know, and I think we all do. But that's part of the process too. Is you veer off, you go off track, and you're trying to meet this ideal of your instructor. His Miyagi, you know, he wants to be that, but when he tries to be that, it doesn't always work. And you know, so I don't fault him for that because I think we all go through it. When it comes to an art and the mentality and philosophy of it, I like the philosophy and mentality of Miyagi-Do.
Yeah.
You know, how it's practiced and performed and how the skills play out. Well, now it really comes down to how Daniel ultimately decides that should be. And if I'll try not to spoil, but you know, if you're following the show, we're kind of leading into the concept that maybe his eyes are opening, that he's been preserving a picture of that one-on-one relationship between him and his teacher, trying to train with multiple people and realizing not everybody is the same and not every situation is the same, and realizing there's more to it than what he had and he needs to expand his mind. And you know, so how that physically looks and how the training goes, you know, I love the things that Miyagi-Do does for training. I don't necessarily think that Daniel has a strong understanding of the whole scope of what those things are for. But that's part of the process, and he lost his teacher early. You know, so when it comes to training, I think when you look at Cobra Kai or Eagle Fang, when it comes to actual just physical training, they're probably in a better place than Daniel is. But Daniel's getting there.
Definitely.
So, Miyagi-Do.
I'm a big Eagle fan now. And more so in the last few months, it's, I think it was my wife started it. She's just watched the whole thing through for the first time recently.
Oh, awesome.
And from seeing me teaching classes and things, she just thinks I'm Johnny Lawrence now. She goes, you're a good fighter, but she goes, your teaching is very unorthodox. But it works.
Yeah.
But I don't know what she means by that, but
interesting. Yeah, that's something to kind of explore, huh?
Definitely. I have to look at my
so which
teaching
camp
methods.
which camp is yours? What's your camp?
I'd say Eagle Fang.
Eagle Fang. Yeah. I do love the growth and exploration of Johnny Lawrence. Like,
yeah,
there's
definitely
some interesting things happening there.
I think my sort of training has been very similar. I kind of started with a very sort of competitive sort of system, and as I kind of got older, I kind of veered more towards the Miyagi-Do side, but it's kind of middle ground at the moment. So,
oh sure,
it's very tempting.
I think they can be reconciled, right? Season 4 saw the ideas of can these things come together, and I do think that they can. But the truth is that's I believe in that myself, and that's almost kind of where I am right now, is trying to figure out how those things go together in the way that I teach and do things in my school. And that is a process. You don't just flip a switch and suddenly you're going, these things go together.
Yeah.
It's a process of figuring out what works, what doesn't work, what gets you there more efficiently, what gets you there less efficiently. And not everybody, I think a lot of people assume that just because you have a black belt or own your school, that you have it all figured out. You have all the answers, you know all the things. And it's like, man, I'm a student. I think, here's one thing. I think so many people forget that a black belt is still a student.
Yeah.
Like, there's a person who gave it to him. That person is a higher skill than them, or a higher rank at least. So they're still a student. If you're a first degree black belt, well, you haven't hit the end. You're not a graduate. You got your associate's degree. You still can go and get your bachelor's or your master's and all your. There is more to do, and if you're a school, my school, both in size and scope, because of those things, doesn't really have. I mean, it's me and one other person right now. If my instructors aren't there. And so there's 2 black belts in the whole room, and I'm one of them. And so everybody else is not there. Well, in a school that has multiple black belts, well, then I think it becomes more obvious. There's 2 ways that goes. Either a whole bunch of people are standing around because they've all reached the end, and now it's just a club. They get together and watch all the other people try to get to where they are. Hint, don't do that. Or you've got one person leading the troop, and there's a whole slew of black belts who are also training right next to everybody else and who are still students and still driving forward. And I think especially from the outside, people don't realize that that's true. They kind of assume that, well, if you got to your black belt, then you must be done. You must have completed it. And you didn't complete it. You've hit a milestone. You've hit a benchmark. But you haven't necessarily, you're not done. But people outside of it automatically feel that way. And I think in a lot of cases, people right there on the mat training with us also think that. And they need kind of educated to understand that that's not it. When you hit this point, you're not done. And I don't want to get into all the tropes and all the ideas of, a black belt. It's really just the beginning and all this stuff. Like, it really kind of depends on how you feel, and it really kind of depends on how your black belt is, and it really kind of depends on your understanding of just the scope of your martial arts being what it is.
Yeah.
But I do strongly believe that if the truth was the black belt was the end, then I don't think you'd ever get one until your sensei passed away. And it was time to inherit, if it was the end, then it would be an inheritance thing, not a thing that we hit in some schools, fairly quickly.
Yeah, definitely. And I explained recently to my students who were asking about black belts. If you look at the Q-Dan grading system, there's usually 10 before you get black belt.
Yeah.
And then 10 after it.
Right.
But in our school now, it would take maybe 7 years to get to the black belt. But you could wait 7 years between that and your second Dan. And the same between your third. So you're really only started by the time you get to your black belt. It's a lifetime journey, really. And you've got 10 before, 10 after that first Dan. So it's really only the halfway mark.
Yeah, right. It's really only halfway mark to that. And it really gets even more complicated when you have people that are like, well, you can only be given. So it's very common for a black belt to only be awarded by somebody who's at least 2 ranks higher than that rank, right? That's kind of the way that typically goes. It's not universally true, but it's pretty common. Well, then what happens if that person passes away and you don't have somebody 2 ranks higher than you? Then it kind of maybe you never get to 10th because maybe they never got to 10th, and then they got to 8th, and the next person only got to 6th. And well, if the numbering part of it gets kind of weird in some ways, I think it overcomplicates the concept of how your progress is going, because it becomes a thought of, well, how do I logistically get to that number? And which is just kind of a fascinating thing, but I think it's kind of a frustrating thing too, because if you really think about it, it's really hard to fathom how that really works and how that goes. And some people try to figure that out by doing it arbitrary. You know, I know the first style I trained was uh, they would go, well, for your first degree, it probably took you at least a minimum of 5 years, if not more. And then uh, after that, if you were going for your second degree, then you were in it at least 2 years before you went for your second degree. If you went for your third, you were in at least 3 years from then before your third degree. Realistically, that is a suddenly forgetting the word, but it's irrelevant, right? It's a thing that just got kind of put in place, but it's not actually. It doesn't mean anything. People's ability to achieve is limited to themselves, right?
Yeah.
How your idea when you mentioned that you took 7 years to get your black belt, it might take you another 7 to get to your second degree. That just speaks to that idea that you're the only person who decides how quickly you get where you're going.
Yeah.
If you get your black belt and then you quit trying, you may never get your second degree. You might keep going for the rest of your life and never get it because you're just not actually trying.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's people who get there sooner, and it shouldn't have been possible to get the rank that quickly. And it's just that they worked hard and they understood it and they were able to achieve it. You know, thankfully we don't have it going the way that so the Q-Don system comes from Go, right? And Go starts with 30th Q to first Q. Can you imagine working your way up like that?
Definitely. I remember when I got my first black belt when I was 17, but I should have got it at 16. But my instructor, he used to fly off the train over in England, so he was actually only ranked at first dan, so he couldn't actually give me my black belt until he'd got the second dan.
Yes.
So I had to wait. I actually done my grading, and I had to wait the year before he could actually award it.
Yeah, so your rank actually became only possible if he achieved his rank.
If he
You're like, I kind of need you to get promoted. Which, isn't that interesting? Arbitrary was the word that I was trying to think of. It's arbitrary. So this idea that your ability to achieve Shodan was based on somebody else's ability to achieve Nidan.
Yeah.
Well, what if they're not trying? What if they're not doing it?
Yeah.
You just never become Shodan? Isn't that weird? Isn't that a weird concept that, you know, it becomes your ability can only be measured and acknowledged if somebody else's ability is being measured and acknowledged, even though we agree that the art is about the individual making their own progress. So the ranking system really introduces a lot of arbitrary concepts that really kind of get in the way of the actual philosophy that's at work, I think.
Definitely. And finally, Ken, how can people find you online? And
Oh, sure. I try to keep it really simple. So I've kind of aggregated everything to kenfu.tv. Just hit the web, go to kenfu.tv. You'll get to the YouTube channel, the podcast. You'll get a link to my school if you want to come train. Any of that stuff, if it's relevant, it's on there.
Excellent. And it was a pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks very
Thank you.
much
This was
for coming
amazing.
on. Thank you. Now,
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was great.